It is.
The year 2011. And boy, the times they are a-changin'. And really, we should be crying buckets of tears because our money has been taken, and we are in for some very, very tough times. We're in a situation over the last 2 years that has become incomprehensibly more difficult and more poor and more destitute and more off course than perhaps most periods in our short history. The name of this show is Colossal Fail, and I am, for history, for the purposes of at least putting it down. As Sojourner Truth used to say, ain't I a woman, ain't I a woman, meaning you'll hear it that I speak the truth. I speak the truth. So let's put it down so we have a record of what goes on since 2009 to November 2011 with the current administration in the White House, Washington, D.C. Let me start out by saying that there's nothing liberal about communism. There's nothing liberal about a leftist. And as you know, much has been said about the administration as being left. Left is not liberal. A liberal is someone that is very tolerant. The word got changed by Ronald Reagan, making it into some kind of foul word. But the true historical meaning of liberal is that free speech is available to everyone, provided they're not hurting anybody, like asking for someone to be killed or robbed or such a thing. There's free speech for everyone, all manner of peoples and purposes, if they're not harmful to anybody in a very real way, are tolerated, and there's a great exchange of ideas, and there's a give and a take and an interest of everyone and everything and everybody. This is liberal. Left is more like communism, if not identical with it, and I won't get into the many shades of different kinds of communism. We could call it Marxism. We can call it socialism. There are so many terms, and I know communism is the term not in vogue today, but nonetheless, we should never equate or come to a comparison as though equal between a liberal and a communist. And I hope that I've been a liberal all my life, though I do have what might be called some conservative ideas of not wanting a society to be totally debauched, as it's becoming right now. So let's just say that. Nothing liberal about communism or being a leftist. In fact, communism dictates that you shut up, that there be only one religion, the religion of socialism, communism, leftism, Marxism. And I'd like to say, too, about the person who leads this administration, that you definitely have to have money to play in his show. For all his fat cat and ridicule and accusation against persons from his very big podium, so-called bully pulpit, if you want to play with the person in charge of this country, you've got to have some very big money, and that has been from day one. And I hope to show that a lot of it is downright crooked, dirty, and not at all what it might seem to the people who follow him assiduously, and just somehow hope that beyond all this real thing that is going on, there'll be some kind of better prospect somehow developing from it. And I'd like to bring back that song that I've used before by Fela Kuti to just remind you, too, to not be a, oh, zombie, zombie, don't be a zombie. Now, let's go back to the beginning of the situation that we're in right now with people protesting in the streets, I guess getting pretty much more violent in many circumstances. They are trying to say that the banks have gotten away with bloody murder. The first thing I'd like to say about that is, why do they not go to Timothy Geithner at the Treasury Department, who was head of the Federal Reserve of New York when all the bank situation was unfolding and before it was unfolding, who continues to be the head of all these banks, in essence, really for all purposes, figuratively and practically speaking, and the head of this administration, and Nancy Pelosi, who gave that TARP money to, what is his name? I can't remember. He was from Goldman Sachs, and he was he the Treasury Secretary at the time? I think he was. Paulson, Hank Paulson. Why don't you begin where it's beginning? I've told you in the past that Mr. Obama himself got $800,000, $700,000 to kickstart his campaign when he was totally unknown to anyone in the general public, way back when from Goldman Sachs. And it's been nothing but a continuation, choosing Geithner, who was overseeing this whole bank situation during the time it was coming apart, and who has provided all this money, all this so-called liquidity, has kept our interest rates low so that we poor suckers who try to make some money, stash a few dollars away, are essentially losing value every day as the money erodes due to the fact that the rates are so low, paying interest on it, and also that so much money has been put into the system to the banks, who are now actually making money off the Federal Reserve by getting money from the Federal Reserve, giving it back to them and getting a small amount of interest on it to boot. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is stacked towards the banks and concerns like the banks such as AIG, etc. But let's go back to where it started. With George Bush, with Timothy Geithner, with Hank Paulson, with Nancy Pelosi, with Harry Reid, and most greatly with Mr. Barack Obama, who have given these banks over and above and beyond and never did anything, even as we sit here today, to stop the potential new erosion of the situation. All the money is gone. It's been taken, put somewhere, but the situation for banks and everything else remains as vulnerable, if not more vulnerable, as we talk here today, and all the money is gone. All the money that we need to survive as a people, all the money that's been put there by taxpayers of the United States of America. Those sucker taxpayers, many of whom are known as the Tea Party, much maligned, who work their fingers to the bone, 2 and 3 jobs, keep their noses clean, send their people to the military, try to raise their kids, and get this kind of circumstance put before them. In the beginning, this is what we all forget. Now these people are protesting Wall Street. Now they want things for free. Now they want to bring down capitalism and all or none response. But when this money was going to be given to the banks in the beginning, around the end of 2008, late in 2008, these same people, the Tea Party, not the ones protesting now, were screaming. The calls were coming in. People were going crazy. Do not you dare to give this money to the banks. And this was pretty much a kind of person that probably would be a member along the way of a Tea Party, that was calling, paying attention, and saying, do not do it. I was thinking to myself, God, do not do it. The day they did it, your heart just sank. It was another day like the day we bombed Iraq. That was also a terrible day. In my mind, the day we bombed Iraq the first time was a terrible day. These are terrible times, and no, we weren't paid attention to. Do not do it. Then, when the stimulus bill in 2009, right after that TARP, when this great big stimulus bill of $862 billion was being passed, pushed through namby-pamby with the most ridiculous kind of terms and justification and analysis and rulemaking for it, such messy, horrible so-called legislation betraying a system very well set up to have proper kinds of legislation, People were screaming, do not do it, do not do it. Who were these people? Were they the Wall Street protesters? No, those people were asleep. They were still mesmerized and in dreamland over the Grecian columns in Colorado and the great one that had come to cleanse the earth and clear the air and make life so much better. And ladies and gentlemen, if you don't see that your life and my life and everybody's life is getting significantly worse day by day, oh, zombie, zombie. Then it was the health care bill. Nothing wrong with health care. We need universal health care. The people who had long been working, physicians and other groups that had long been working to have universal health care were not allowed into the initial hearings on the health care bill. That was closed off to them. Do people know that? It wasn't even allowed to be presented or argued. And we got this monstrosity called health care, which is not health care, which is doing such terrific damage right now and will continue to do more damage to our health, our welfare, and certainly to our pocketbook. Do you know that now there are less people insured than there were before? Health care costs are going up. People are being dropped in the millions from employers' health care, employers giving them health care. But there's much, much worse. We're not getting into that. These were the people, these so-called nasty Tea Party, that I hear the left, which talks about revolution on the radio. There is a channel, I forgot the name of it, but I think it's called, its motto or thing is revolution. They're leftists. These people who are now calling for this, and it's been a long concerted effort, and a true lineage and connection can be made between people around and the president himself from way back when with what he studied, what he taught, the institutes, the people that he was associated with, what he tried to do as a so-called community organizer, some of the flotillas that have gone to try to cause difficulty with between Israel and Palestine, the so-called blockades and so on, and the many, many associations and affiliations that are built up around this so-called leftist cause. We're not there to say, wait a minute, this is ridiculous health care. This is horrible. This is not what's going to help more people in a better kind of way. And the stimulus money is just going to take the money and take it from us, and then what? Then what? But who was there? This so-called malign Tea Party, and my point is about talking about these leftists, again, back to that. They still refer to the Tea Party as teabaggers today on this radio show. That's what they call them. And teabaggers is a term that has a sexual connotation that is very vile and vulgar. The president himself has used that term at times. So I want people to remember that it was not the people now getting violent who suddenly realized, and why not go to Timothy Geithner in the Treasury Department, why not go to the White House and the Congress and really shout where the blame belongs, the people who gave the money and continue to give the money. Now with the people that are protesting now, though some of what they say is true, and it might not be the complete picture of where to put the blame, but if we go along with what they have in mind, free, and apparently there's a lot of drug use there, there's, quite a bit of filth because they have to evacuate and urinate in their own spot, and quite a bit of danger there. We could all be bums together. We could all be bums together. And guess what? Even if we're out there working hard, keeping our noses clean, we are all becoming bums together because we are losing ground day by day, a lot of ground. Now, what about greed? When we call people greedy, and say, Wall Street is greedy and so forth, and I have said in lectures prior to now, and I've been at this podium for quite a while, I have talked about the problems with our system. I'm not saying we had we do have a fundamentally great and flexible and viable system, but we had gotten way out of balance with some people getting a lot of money and other people not getting enough. There's no doubt. But that's a whole other story we're not going to get into. So I agree. But the idea that we're all going to just be bums and get things for free somehow, who's going to buy them, grow them, make them? And greed. Greed is everybody. Don't blame Wall Street for greed. How much you want to make a bet that most of us sitting in any of the seats of people that are in the seats that we don't like that they have would do the same thing as they do? Let's not think that we're holier than they. And greed is part of human nature. Imagine if we're a group and we don't have enough food or some money drops down in front of us, what are we going to do? We're all going to run and grab our part, for the most part. Let's be real. Let's be real, ladies and gentlemen. Greed is built into our human nature. When you throw popcorn down for pigeons, they all flock and some birds other than pigeons will actually, butt each other and fight, and greed is wired in to the organism. Maybe dolphins aren't greedy, I don't know, but it's certainly human nature to be greedy. If every man in the end is an island, and every man or woman has to carry his or her own weight. And there's a cry for fairness. Oh, fairness. And another note too, by the way, life is very hard, in my opinion. Life is just very hard. And cry for fairness. There is no fairness in life. That doesn't mean we have a system that's fair and correct. Fundamentally, it could be. It had gotten out of bounds and out of whack. That's true. But life isn't fair. I just saw the other day in a store, two little kids. One was about 3, the other was 2. And the one that was 3 had something, and the one that was 2 was going after him, wanted it. And the one that was 3 is making faces like, no way, no way. You give one child a cookie and you don't give the other. What does the other one say? Hey, what about me? So fairness is evolutionarily and biologically something that we know should be happening, but has a long, long way to go to evolve. And it doesn't evolve with violence. It doesn't evolve with name-calling. It doesn't evolve with being nasty. Believe it or not, it evolves as we become more compassionate people, which is nothing we can do. None of this can be done just by saying so or overturning something. It's interesting to note that in the New York Occupy protest, so to speak, one day I heard on the radio that the people in the Occupy were getting very upset at the homeless coming and taking jackets. Some people had donated jackets, I guess, and the homeless were trying to get jackets and food, and the people at Occupy were very upset. What do you think will happen in a so-called social justice fair system? Do you not think that's not a prototype, that people who, so to speak, don't work, and we could, in my opinion, find very solid reasons in most cases for people who are homeless as to why they do what they do, so that it's not so amazing that they are homeless or so-called bums if you got inside their lives and knew what kind of a row they had to hoe. So it's kind of interesting that the occupiers themselves is like, hey, don't take this from us. Oh, what was that? Greed showing its face? And also that they're having arguments amongst themselves of who's going to lead the groups. And no group can remain like everybody talking. You get nowhere. You've been at meetings, I'm sure, where that happens. And sooner or later, the human nature is such that some people, it ends up being the ones in control till someone else, challenges it and becomes in control, and so on. And it's interesting that in several of these gatherings, people are parroting what the ones who are the so-called leaders are saying. They will say their message in short phrases, and the people will repeat each phrase in unison, sort of like a church service, because leftism, socialism in the extreme, and communism, Marxism are religions. They are religions. In other words, that they are all or none. It's what you believe, and it's what you do, and it is exclusive of religion. And communism always has a strong man or woman or several that's getting to be the dictator that can tell how it's going to be and what people have to do, what they can and can't do, with the rest of people being drones. Communism has, and of course in this case, we have two people occupying the White House who are telling us what to do and how we're going to live and have dibs on our life. This is the United States of America, the land of freedom and liberty. Nobody has dibs on anyone else's life, provided they're not harming someone physically or in some way that is beyond the pale legally. In communism, or in this leftist idea, this distributive idea, there is always repression. Repression, you can look at it in any country, any time, including today. It ends up that there becomes killing. Even a lot of these regimes have killed, China is a great example, but all of them, Russia, you name it, have killed persons they feel don't fit the mold of what has to be in whatever it is they're planning to have for people to live by. There's thought control. You're not going to be able to come up with other ideas philosophically, religiously, or any other way. Even artistically. There has been a big push in the White House to have art conform, and this is done in Russia and China too, conform to the social justice idea. Conform to this whole concept or storyline, as Obama has called it, the way you tell the story to the people, conform to put into place this doctrine and the people that have to be controlled by it. And there's no free speech or liberty. That is antithetical to a leftist goal. Liberty and freedom, just like greed and many other things, including compassion. But liberty and freedom are an inextricable part of the human psyche. And that's why you see people in countries that have lived under very strict dictatorial circumstances, tyrannical circumstances, talk about freedom and liberty, and up till now at least looking to countries that are free and more liberal as something to aspire to, something to immigrate to, something to develop into. And yes, we are capitalism. Capitalism gone beyond the bounds, gotten not quite as free, definitely not free capitalism or laissez-faire as it should be. But nonetheless, even though we could be working on better ways to make it work for more people more of the time, the essential concept of a laissez-faire society, free speech, people work and each according to their own ability, make whatever kind of life they can imagine or get together and create. Only capitalism affords synchrony and a model and a type of living that can actuate those features of human existence. The features of being free, of creating one's life according to one's beliefs and knowledges and efforts, and being able to think and say for oneself. We could debate, and I've said this in other lectures, we could debate in this country, we're not at that now, instead of calling people names and trying to confiscate what they have, though I'm not altogether against raising taxes in certain levels of, and certainly for corporations like GE, Obama's very close pal, Mr. Immelt, the corporation that he is joined at the hip with, paying no taxes for $15 or $14 billion of revenue, and submitting 57,000 pages of their tax return to show they owe no taxes. We could be talking about pay equity. We're a long way from that the way it is now. Instead of calling people out and tearing things down and getting in people's way and trying to prevent others from living their life, we do have to have a national discussion of who should get paid what and what kind of labor gets what paid. That is out of whack. But that's a whole different take on it than what has been occurring now. What has been occurring now is a quiet, gentle, almost imperceptible revolution. I brought up to you before the Saul Alinsky method, the Cloward-Piven method, and the Cloward-Piven person was at one of these Wall Street gatherings speaking. To bring the system down in very quiet, gradual, everything's rolling along, you see, rolling along, and many, many groups and organizations are enlisted while we were asleep for years before now to creepingly bring it to pass, to shut us up, to shut us down, to equalize us with the rest of the world, and to take or destroy what we have gained. And I say, according to what is going down now, please start with Hollywood. Please start with all the stars who come out and make an appearance at these gatherings, and go back to carpets that are this thick as they walk in their beautiful mansions. Please start with them when you want to take the money. Please start with people in sports. Please start with people in Congress who come out of Congress much richer than oftentimes than they went in. Those do-gooders who can afford $500 salmon, those do-gooders, they're so good. Like Nancy Pelosi would tell you, they just want to do it for the American people. We've been robbed, ladies and gentlemen. What would have happened in the beginning? God forbid the president be practical. How about if in the beginning, with all the money that he's thrown away, taking it off trees out of the backyard of the White House, open the door to the Treasury, take it, take it, take it. We're redistributing. These suckers don't need it. I have something against them. I have something against this way of life. Take everything that's been developed in the United States of America. What would have happened if money immediately in 2009 went into the schools that needed it most and brought them the latest equipment and the latest facilities and all kinds of daycare. In fact, even places people could drop their kids off who didn't want to be bothered with them, if, in order to not abuse them or leave them less than guided. What would have happened? What would have happened if we had said, Anybody who makes a B plus or better gets to go to college on our dime. What would have happened? Do you think a lot of kids would have started studying real fast? And now the money is gone. God forbid we do something practical and sound. And let me tell you, when people voted for this person whom I've called stealth time and time again, they didn't have an exact idea. You couldn't tell. It was very vague, but I guarantee you they felt that the economically disadvantaged people were going to be funded and brought to a level playing field much more than is now. We're having a war also on marijuana. Whereas it was felt by some people there would be less of that as this administration came in. And what about all the people that end up in a problem because of it? And what about people in prison sort of unjustifiably? In fact, unjustifiably. No respect for this country. Bring it down. The Bill Ayers. Bill Ayers, who famously said, the United States makes me puke. Well, I would say any of you out there who even are not happy with your station in life or your life in general or whatever, or has gripes, have you felt up till now that the United States made you puke? The person who runs the country, or runs it to the ground, I should say, has called the United States lazy recently, has called us soft, has called us unimaginative, has called us unambitious. And on this present trip in one of the countries he was in right now, he was telling the other country, our kids are behind. What leader goes to another country and tells them that our kids are behind? What leader goes to other countries and says, we want to see you do well, but calls us lazy and unimaginative? And we will get into projection, of which he is very much a doer. That is, putting on to others what you're guilty of yourself. And I never forget, too, certain lines of his are hard to forget. When he was out of law school and got a very brief stint at some kind of presumably financial organization. And he said he sat behind the computer and it was like he was behind enemy lines. Who thinks like that? Except a revolutionary. Even if you hate your job or you think corporations S-U-C-K, do you think you're behind enemy lines? You will now with what's going down. Why? Well, why? It's a long story why. This person has so much media behind him, hook, line, and sinker, and I've said this before. If you go to the so-called right-wing media or the left-wing media, you won't even see the same news stories. Try it sometime. Try 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning or 6 p.m. Better in the morning because that's when they're telling the news of the day. Go, for example, to Fox. Go to MSNBC. Watch what they lead with. Watch what they're talking about. You will find one is devoted to maintaining and promoting the power in Washington, not having so many of the things in the news that I'm telling you about, whereas the other one is telling a whole different situation of what is going on. And if you were privy to some of these other news informations, which even if your head is not where these heads are coming from, nonetheless, there are facts that are being put down that you have to be aware of. And 80% of the energy loans given out to people by this administration have been given to people who fundraise for the president. And that is part of this Solyndra scandal right now, where half of $535 million was given to a company that right within the administration was said by persons reviewing it, don't do it, this is a fraud, this is a sham. And it was given because it would make a good photo op, and also these were bundlers and fundraisers to whom the money was going. If you were aware how so much of this money that has gone, disappeared, is tied to people who fundraise and bundle for the administration. That is corrupt. That is dirty. Now, the scandal that you're familiar with is the one called Solyndra, of which I spoke. But there are so many others. It's just incredible that the money is gone and there is nothing to show for it. Things haven't been built. People haven't been trained. People haven't been hired. The companies that got the money sent jobs to China. All crony capitalism, all involved in fundraising, bundling, laying their hands on the money, all gone. And what have we got to show for it? What have we got to show for it? The story that was to be told of a green economy. What a fantasy story. What an unrealistic story, because the green economy, though we have to work on that, and though green is something that we can work on and do better at, but it takes many years and we are far away from it, and it is very costly, and it is nowhere near in a situation to be implemented in the here and now in some kind of facile way by virtue of all this money that has gone into oblivion, that has gone into a rat hole with nothing to show for it. You'd be well advised to be reading about how much money is gone and no one can account for it or what has happened to it. It's absolutely absurd. There's one other one I think of right now. One company got money to be making some kind of smallpox drug for people who might not have been vaccinated or so, and it's very dubitable if the drug could ever work, and it's also dubitable because it's not needed as a drug. This is an example also. Then there's the case recently of one of John Kennedy's relatives, the person who was president of the United States, receiving a $1.2 billion bailout for some investment he made for he and his very wealthy investors. It goes on and on and on. The record of it is abhorrent. And this doesn't occur to you what is going on here? And how are we going to pay for things? How are we going to pay for things with all the money gone? Corrupt deals left and right. It is shocking and astounding to imagine or to know or to realize how the money has been squandered. And I wish those of you who might be interested would go and Google any of this and just Google keywords like money from the stimulus, where did it go, you name it, or any money being given out, money for green technology, government money, where did it go? Money to car companies that were producing green automobiles and so forth. Folded, bankrupt, or for jobs. No jobs created, one job created, two jobs created with millions of dollars, no bridges built, no nothing built. Where did all this money go? Do you understand what kind of a record this is? This is an appalling record. If your eyes were open, you would say, whoa, wait a minute, this isn't right. You don't take money you have and a good position you have and all the things that it pays for and just squander it. Open the doors Give it to your fundraisers. Give it to wealthy individuals. Give it to people that are around you. And who are these people that take this money, like Solyndra, and lose $535 million in a short period of time, no problem, and nothing to show for it? And now the Secretary of Energy said, we're probably not going to get any of that money back. No kidding. No kidding. What kind of people are these? And they're working fundraising. They're working giving money to the administration at the same time. Corruption. Is doing this kind of thing, giving it all away with unsound practices, with story ideas? And I'm reminded, too, that in a book recently by a Mr. Susskind, about the Obama administration, in there he quotes Obama, whom he sat down with and got interviews with, saying that he tells a story to the people. He has to have a good story. And the storyline was green and redistribution. This is the storyline, and it's unfolding very slowly and very seemingly innocuously, seeming as though it's all just happening automatically, sort of to use a term, progressively. I forgot to use that term before. Slowly unfolding and unraveling, but being worked on for a long time with a storyline to it. Is it a conscious attempt to undermine the country? Or is it an unconscious attempt and just boondoggling? Or is it a little bit of both, and is it a little bit a part of the narcissistic personality with some of its quirks and pitfalls and pathologies? Another thing you will notice about this president is that he doesn't like anybody. Well, let me put that a different way, is that he likes people who don't like us. Those seem to be the ones he's more attuned to. These are just perceptions. These are things that can be seen if you follow closely. And I think that he was surrounded, even what we know about him, he was surrounded early on by people of the left persuasion, certainly his father, etc. In fact, possibly his grandfather and grandmother, maybe his mother. And it appealed to him. And it appealed to him perhaps, too, to a great extent, as a person who was very scarred. This is a person who was very scarred. Well, so was Bill Clinton for different reasons. But Mr. Obama had a history of psychological deprivation and perhaps even financial deprivation, some of which would be when he was at the prestigious school in Hawaii where people all had money pretty much and he did not. That leaves a certain kind of effect on an individual. And some of how he's done what he's done reminds me of giving payback to all the people. Payback. Because he had a very horrible beginning life. A very detachment, twisted, upside down, this and that. And even if you look into this guy, Frank Davis, who was a sort of tutor of him, who wrote a book of how he exploited people sexually and who was a member of the Communist Party. And even if you read one of the poems that Obama has in one of his books about the sweat and the stained, I think the person in the underwear, the yellow stain, something about that, suggestive of not pretty stuff. So he's had a very difficult beginning and had to make sense of it, and was at the odd man out. He had no wealth when he was in that school of everybody being wealthy. And then in Indonesia, I read too that at least one time, if not more, children threw rocks at him. And his mother reportedly said at that time, because she was walking with someone and Obama was just walking along like it didn't bother him in his own world. And the mother said, leave him alone. That's how he reacts to that stuff. And is there a tinge of revenge on people for how he's going about things? Certainly revenge on the country. We get to be the one. We're the bad thing in the world. And as I've said to you before, he's ruthless and he's cold. And we've gone into the narcissism. We've gone into the fact that he's not altogether realistic. I don't think he would have liked this information to come out about these companies that have only managed to use and abuse all the money that has been given to them. But he is unrealistic beyond that, like when he was working on anything but getting the economy in order from the day he became president, which was our only and most significant pressing need. When he was working on a reset with Russia, and aides said they couldn't get him away from that. When the country was on its knees needing someone to not give away all the money, squander it on crazy things with corrupt deals, but maybe go into the schools where the people needed it, for example. And other things, other sane things that had a good foundation to them and really would give us a structure that we could use to get ourselves to a better place. And then if we look at how he won his elections in the Illinois State Senate and the U.S. Senate, very not pretty. And it's easy to imagine that this so-called dirt that's been brought up about Herman Cain might have been a play similar to the plays Axelrod made on his behalf when he ran for state senate and then when he ran for U.S. Senate, which in the second circumstance was digging up sealed records of people, as in divorce and other situations, and getting those records somehow open and causing stories to be made about them such that they fell out of the race, and either in the first instance, as a state senator, he eventually ran unopposed, and in the second instance, he only had left a guy like Alan Keyes to be his opposition, and therefore easily won his way into the United States Senate. And in the first case of the Illinois Senate, too, he challenged Alice Palmer's signatures to get on the ballot. She had been the person in the state for that seat. She had already had it. And she's a leftist as well. And she said she gave it to him, introduced him, and gave him the chance because she was running for something else. Then it happened, she came back and said, no, she's going to still run for that. He went and challenged her names, got it thrown out, got other people's names thrown out. He ran unopposed, and he won. And in the second case, to the U.S. Senate, he got people debilitated by unsealing documents and coming up with these lewd or bad stories about them. Who's going to pay for us now that the money has been so squandered by a person who's never liked the Tea Party or other people in this United States? Never mind the Tea Party. No matter what their station is in life, people who work their fingers to the bone, be they modest income or middle or high or whatever, who's going to pay now that the money that people have so diligently worked for, and it all comes from the people and provided to the Treasury, provided to the United States, has been given away not only within this country in corrupt manners and silly, crazy, foolish, ill-conceived manners, zombie manners, but also to other countries of the world. Who's going to pay for us to have the continuing oversight of our food supply and our water, even as it is right now? Never mind about better regulations. Who's going to pay for us to maintain a military? Are you telling me that we should let go of our defense and allow ourselves to just become vulnerable? Why? Why should the United States, why would anyone that's achieved what we've achieved willingly say, hey, we just want to be poor. We want to sit in squalor. We want to defecate on police cars. We want to sit in tents with urine and feces. Who's going to pay for social service? Who's going to pay for nursing homes? Who's going to pay for infrastructure? But not the way the current Washington wants it done. But still, he has a following. He has a following, and they want to bring this redistributive change. Now, I mentioned Mr. Kane. Let me talk about Mr. Kane for a minute. A guy that I mean, barring that I would find something out, I don't know him whatsoever, but I find him to be very plausible and very sort of uplifting to listen to. A guy with so far, don't hold me to it because we don't know enough about him, but a guy with a head on his shoulders and a heart in his heart and a soul in his soul. Mr. Kane. Let's look at the difference between how the current person occupying the White House, and of course Mr. Kane's chances have been badly bruised up till now. One guy got apparently not good grades. He won't show any of those records. They're all sealed, and he comes from some really, like community college, I guess, kind of a college somewhere, gets to go to Columbia, gets to go to Harvard. How does all this happen? I could tell you that whole story. I've told you in the past. Never writes a single thing while he's the head of the Harvard Law Review, which, as a person who's been in academia for too many years, I can tell you is not fathomable. And I can tell you by the way he speaks now, not an intellectual, but an intellectualizer. Not deep, but shallow. Cruised by, got everybody, whoa, just following. Mr. Kane, what does Mr. Kane do? This silly guy, this ridiculous fool. Mr. Kane, he comes up in a time when there is legal segregation. He comes up in a time when his father, at least for some of the time, was a chauffeur and his mother was a maid. He works himself at menial jobs. And he goes to Moorhead College, and guess what? He gets a degree in mathematics. What a screwball. What a lousy guy. He gets a degree in mathematics, Mr. Kane. And guess what he does after that? He gets a master's degree in computer science. Another foolish move. And guess what he does after that? He becomes the United States Navy Department ballistics analyst. Oh, come on, Mr. Kane. Can't you do better than that? Can't you be head of the Harvard Law Review? Where you never write a single thing in it while you're the head of it? Then, after being a Navy ballistics analyst, Mr. Kane goes to Coca-Cola where he's a computer systems analyst. And each time, he's graduating to another level. Poor Mr. Kane. Poor Mr. Hard-working, decent Kane. Then, after Coca-Cola, he goes to Pillsbury. He becomes director of business analysis. And along the way, in that stint, he manages 400 Burger Kings. Oh, Mr. Kane, is that all you could do? Couldn't you part the ocean and make the skies clean? And couldn't you hand out $500 million to a company that goes under within months and fundraises for you? After this, Mr. Kane becomes the CEO of Godfathers. Then after that, he becomes the CEO of the National Restaurant Association. What a fool. What a fool. And a man who knows what he believes and dares to say it. Not stealth, not hiding, not trying to say this is a story I'm going to perpetrate on the people so they'll be convinced. No. He tells you his true thinking. He was also head of the Federal Reserve Board of Kansas City. He was first the deputy chairman and then the chairman. And it was the people there, I read what they said, that first suggested to him that he run for president. They said he was so good at making people come together and come up with a result. Very effective. I bring this up because here's a startling example of the capitalist in the right way, working his way every level, hard work and achievement, and in my opinion, highly, highly admirable, and way more than I ever did. And guess what? Just for the record, too, it's been said, I didn't see all this stuff, but I've heard many a pundit and conversation about this on radio and TV, that the criticism of Mr. Kane from people of his own race who were progressives on the other side was the most brutal and vile and despicable as any caricature that has ever been promoted to that circumstance, done to Mr. Kane. He also writes an op-ed column. He's had 4 or 5 books. He's been on the board of directors of Aquila, Nabisco, Whirlpool, Reader's Digest, etc. So just to show you, while one was traveling to places that people don't understand how he had the money, because he had no money, and getting into schools that mostly you wouldn't have that pathway, and having all his records sealed, and having many anomalies in his record, including a driver's license from Connecticut, which is impossible if you never lived there or worked there, which is the case, and who never understood, always once he became a lawyer, was on the boards in Chicago, always getting money, millions running through his hands. Not money that he made, but that he got his hands on, as it is today. And he got the biggest prize of all. He got the United States Treasury. And there's no such thing as just free. There's no such thing. Again, I say that our capitalistic system, as it exists, has gotten out of balance. And that's a very deep and long story. But nonetheless, it still beats anything called leftism or progressivism. Now, I aim to say, in the next part of what I'm talking about, I want this to be on record as a place where it's all been put together, the things that the person who is the commander-in-chief and president is about. They are destruction, incompetency, unless we talk about him trying to bring down the United States and trying to get us into worse and worse difficulty. We can't say for sure that's his explicit goal. But if it is, boy, I take back the incompetency. Then I say super competent. A traitor because we have certain values and principles, and we don't pick and choose, as he has done, laws that you can just ignore. At least we wouldn't publicly come out and do that. We'd go through the courts. We'd go through the Congress. And it could go on, each one, but I have to keep going here. Swindler, corrupt, most of all, lie. He lies. That is his basically, when he isn't lying, that's the unusual time. This all fits with the narcissism, the unrealism, the very scarred background. No morality, amoral. in my view. Why do I say that? And this applies to leftists in general. The end justifies the means. In other words, any means you can use to get to where you want to go is okay. And specifically, let me point out to you something I've pointed out in the past, that when he was a state senator in Illinois, a situation came up where a baby was born full term by mistake. It was meant to be aborted. The question came up, new situation. What do we do when we get a baby born that was supposed to be killed? And Mr. Obama said we treat it as a fetus, i.e., we get rid of it. Nobody else did, but that was his stand. I think more than once, for example. But the curious thing is, too, when he was at Rick Warren's summit early on when he was running for presidency, and he and McCain each got the same questions, but separately, of general things. And one was about life and abortion. And they asked him, what about that? He said, it's above my pay grade, was his answer to that. No depth, no reason why he would want to think this way, or maybe one he didn't want to divulge. And maybe he's always reading the teleprompter because he doesn't want to divulge. That's how you can make mistakes. And he's also somewhat like a child in certain sort of ways, because probably he didn't have that proper developmental childhood. He was robbed of his childhood, really. Think of the things he's done now as a destroyer. He destroyed NASA programs, the shuttle program, and so on. And guess what? As far as African American life goes, NASA happens to be a place where very many people were African American at all levels of work at NASA. And how many thousands are out of work because of the president's decision to cancel out programs of NASA? He canceled Yucca Mountain. I'm not favorable to nuclear power. However, it is being worked on, and there are people who propose it, and there may be a time, and certainly even if they don't build more plants, we have a lot of nuclear waste. And something should be done with it. And Yucca was one of those places for it that was being developed. He closed that. The Gulf of Mexico. This one event is enough to criminalize behavior of how it played out. Do you know that even as we speak today, dolphins are dying? Fish are coming with lesions. You can go and read the reports from Louisiana right now. People are sick. They've got pustules on their skin. The shrimp are coated with oil. There's a new lake nobody's talking about that they say has identical oil. They have a way of telling which oil is from which place, and it's still leaking as far as I know, and they've said it's BP, but BP just got the rights to drill again in the Gulf of Mexico, and BP, as I've told you, was a partner with this cap and trade and all this story, this la-la thing that was going to happen in this administration. They've had an association with this administration. And they're drilling again, and apparently they're using the same kind of wellhead as happened before. But there's oil now coming up. The shrimps are coated, the oyster counts are way down, the crab counts are way down. And guess what? I was going to talk a little further on about intellectualization, where you distance yourself. It's not the same as being intellectual. Intellectualization is using reason and distance against your emotion in talking about things. And to a great extent, as a society, we're kind of intellectualized. You know how everything we talk about is sort of technical, not very profoundly technical, but we're on to like which things are wrong and how, how people should behave and which things are okay to have and not okay. And it's all like technical, pseudoscientific intellectualization about the life that we're living in. We're no longer living just whatever way is natural to us. It's all we're grouping according to agendas and things that have to be amended, and there's no end. Amend bullying, amend, prohibitions against certain sexual practices, amending, we all need counseling, we need indoctrination. It's all intellectualized. We're living a very intellectualized life, divorced from prima facie reality right in front of us. And the Gulf is a situation that is criminal as to what occurred there in their not immediately allowing the ships that volunteered from around countries of the world to come help us with their technology, being refused to come and do it, to waiting 2 weeks to go down there, to waiting many days before speaking of it, to never calling the chairman of the company, to never wanting to be seen or associated with it, to allow the spraying of that Corexit that went inward up to 100 miles over the people, which caused the oil to sink rather than be able to be collected, and which is killing slowly. May we suffer like the animals and the dolphins. May we suffer how they agonizingly and slowly swim, breathe the toxins. So we're intellectualized, for example, about the Gulf. Distant. We don't want to see firsthand. We don't want it, because what does that do? That pulls at our heartstrings. We're intellectualized about everything, about our children, about their autism, about their performance, about this, about how many, counting their behaviors, etc. We're intellectualized. Then there was Iraq. Pulling out of Iraq, never talking with Maliki this whole time. We're not going to let all these maimed, head-injured veterans and all this other treasure and supply go down the tube and have Iraq devolve into a mess? Should we not keep a little bit of something there? Do we just let it all go from a practical point of view? And housing. How can you stand there with the Gulf of Mexico? How can you stand there with programs that supposedly were there to help housing and see that every month, every year, people are losing their homes more and more and more? And I happen to have met a couple that lost their home by going into one of those programs. How about when he gave 30 billion barrels of oil? And everybody said, the oil price will not change if you do that, and that's called our strategic reserve. You don't give that away. That's like gold. And he did. How about when he shut car dealers down? Just out of the blue. Now you might say, well, I don't like car dealers anyway. Oh, really? Well, it's like everything. One day what happens to somebody, next day happens to you. Just shut them down. Oops, they were out of business. What about bondholders that didn't get paid in GM? And that reminds me about GM. They just owned up that there's many more billions owed than what is said, so don't go for that. And also they have tax benefits that are unbelievable into the future. And also the U.S. pays a nice fee if you buy a Volt. So, I mean, it's a gravy train. No wonder the people were protesting, forgive me, the teabaggers as they have been called. No wonder. And other people. Hey, what the heck are you doing with our money? No budget, unheard of. 2 years in a row, very convenient. Just don't make a budget. Is this happening on purpose? Or is this happening out of incompetency? Or is this happening, geez, how could it happen? This is too much to happen. Now, competency. Well, the president is supposed to be a constitutional lawyer, but I'll be a blue-nosed gopher if most persons couldn't debate him fluently without a teleprompter in circles around that. He just doesn't give off that fluency of thought and so on. Smart? I'm not saying no. I'm talking intellectual or not. How does he deal with the opposition? When he first came in, guess what he said to the opposition? First he invited them for drinks, blah, blah. But then when it got down to talking, and what do you do when you have to get things going amongst people that don't agree? You got to give some to them, take some from your own, and they've got to let you have some and so forth. But what did he say to them? He said, I won. That was his answer. I won. And I remember watching a healthcare summit where it was very patronizing and disdainful of John McCain and other people that were there, I remember. And at the end, they were all, saying what they wish was in it and so forth, and that was supposed to be the point of it. And at the end, I watched it. He said, well, I'm doing it my way. He uses intimidation. He uses name-calling. These are all things outlined, too, in Alinsky's book, How to Do a Stealth Revolution. He tries to squeeze people like he did with Bibi Netanyahu, and look where that has gone. Life is nuanced, and great leaders, if they're not dictators, if they're not tyrants, work it. You never get in life, pretty much, you never get all good, all bad, all what you want, and none of what you don't want. That's not how a viable system can work. Everybody's got to get something. And some people make out better than others. But you don't have one where you just squeeze them out and say, I won. We know about Israel. We know that's a mess. We know there's been no progress in Korea, which I remember listening to an expert talk about Korea, saying how the Koreans, that is the North Koreans, will always cheat and always be, doing something underhanded. But that you've got to live with that, and you've got to work with that. You've got to get like most of what you want. Well, so far we haven't gotten anything we want. And Iran. How come he bypassed Iran when they were screaming for us to help them? And it's very interesting when I look at the map of how countries are being related with, or which countries are being related with. And I was looking at that the other day, and I see, well, Iran is in one spot, but there's Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Libya, and then you go down, there's Sudan, Somalia, I'm trying to think, there's Kenya, and so on, there's Gabon across the way. You see a pattern there, and then you remember, too, that when he went to Turkey, the president, he said that we were, I'm paraphrasing, something to the effect that we were not a Christian nation. And when he went to the G20 summit this year, he shook hands with everybody, but he gave a hug to the president of Turkey. And there's a whole situation going on the continent of Africa right now, and for years, of Arab power and Muslim power taking more of a stronghold. There's a real effort. It's not new, but it's really gained momentum. And there's an awful lot of thrust that way. And one looks at that map and you see Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Libya, and then you go down and you see the other places that troops of our country have been put into. And I won't talk about Kenya right now, but some of the things the president has done in Kenya and with Kenya even now. And how many things are left not being taken care of, like Hamid Karzai, who's never been spoken with pretty much by the president, who now is kind of turned against the situation. Maybe not the U.S., but certainly the people he has to deal with in the U.S. And again, like I said, with Iraq, didn't talk to Maliki this whole time to try to, he saved face saying now we're out, and he got to get his base to approve of what he's doing. But he never made the more practical, reasonable for all the tears and horrible injuries people have suffered and will continue to suffer to just let Iraq be fundamentally unprotected after the pullout. So many things he's not attended to, like when the Gulf of Mexico was happening, as I told you, parties, sports people, it was going hot and heavy. Maybe there's not been that much lately during that awful Gulf of Mexico. Busy making deals, though, like Solyndra, to maintain power. And I will say this. This is a person in the presidency who is not going to let power go. So back to the intellectualization that I described to you already, not being an intellectual. Add to that projection, where you blame to others the things that are failures of yourself. And again, not saying he's not smart, just saying not an intellectual. And what are the motives? What is the real thing? If you saw the money being used and absconded with and gone forever, and people having to work harder and harder, and all these bills we've got coming down the road, all these ways we're leaving ourselves, why would we willingly become so much more vulnerable? And back to Mr. Kane that I just present as a counterpart to this. Mr. Kane has his number. Mr. Kane, who's worked and graduated himself every step of the way, has got this guy's number. Then the traitor, or what should I say, not exactly, but willing to, selling us down the tube, essentially not following through with what the country really is, doing something entirely different without us ever realizing it or not letting us know that he's doing it. Let's look for one at our Christian heritage. Myself, I'm not a religious person. I do come from a Christian background, a Catholic background to be exact. I know an awful lot about religion of all kinds and the philosophies of religion. But whether I'm religious or not, whether you're religious or not, this country, its laws, its ethics, its judicial system, very much based on Western civilization and the heritage of Christianity. That is to say, principles of justice, fairness, and all that, Christian kind of heritage. That doesn't mean other people aren't more than welcome and free to be. It just means you're not any less Christian here than you're Muslim in some other land, and you're not going to go over to Libya and say, all right, now you're going to become Christian. We're not going to have the Muslim philosophy, the Muslim laws, the Muslim rules, and the Muslim kind of way of being, which is East is East and West is West. Well, recently, the president wanted to put a tax on Christmas trees. Very interesting, if you look at the other things he's done about Christianity. He finally dropped that because people were in an uproar about it. Then, just recently, the Catholic Church is one of the very effective players in being organized against human trafficking, which is a pretty big problem in this country as well. But the HHS
recently denied the Catholic Church a renewal of its contract to fight trafficking, even though it is the most successful organization in this effort, because it does not refer possible victims for abortion and related services.
Then there was the legislation that, was it the health care bill? I think it was, that went on into Christmas Eve. And I just say to you, if that were Ramadan, let's say the highest day of Ramadan, would people been told to stay in there? Christmas Eve, they were slaving away, and I don't care that they were slaving away, because what they did, the ridiculous so-called bill they made, is a travesty. But nonetheless, Christmas Eve. And then the country, too, was put through that when Christmas is supposed to be a time. You can't have trees. You can't have Santa Claus. You can't have a manger. You can't have a cross. Recently, there was some memorial in the desert for veterans marked with a cross. It had to go to court because people said, no, you can't have a cross, and it was finally allowed. But, you know, nothing of this heritage, it's being squashed. When the president some time ago spoke at Georgetown University, there was, which is a Catholic institution, there was a symbol on the wall, IHS, which refers to Jesus Christ. He made them cover it in a black cloth before he would speak. Oh, this is the killer. Recently, in a memorial being made to veterans of D-Day, that horrible day in World War II, that most famous day, the president then Franklin Roosevelt, used God in his speech to the people. This is what they were going to do. God willing, God help us, a prayer like in the midst of his speech. Well, now it's being disallowed that this prayer should appear in the memorial. Ladies and gentlemen, when are you going to open your eyes? And I'm not even a person who is about God. I'm not an atheist and I'm not an agnostic. I'm just not, period. But ladies and gentlemen, we need guideposts, but we need our history too. And then the deal he made with Russia, which is not in our best interests in many ways, over nuclear weapons. I'm not going to get into it. And how he gave away the serial numbers against England's wishes of what the serial numbers were to their missiles, and gave it to Russia, though England said, no, you can't do that. How he allowed for the guy from Libya who hijacked the plane, Lockerbie, and said he knew nothing of it until the letter came out showing he knew about it all along. How right now the science czar is sharing technology with China, which is supposed to be even against the law. The Congress had made a law against that. How he gave money to Brazil to develop its oil. And I'm not into oil drilling necessarily. No, I'm not. But I'm a realist that right now we're still on oil. I wouldn't go into the tundra. I wouldn't go into Alaska. But the oil wells that are there, I'm not going to stop them. And I'm not going to not depend on oil on a fiction. I'm not going to grow corn everywhere for ethanol and take up all the valuable land and raise the price of corn so that people can't eat and all the land is used up on non-food production. So anyway, he gives money to Brazil, and he tells Brazil, and he tells India, and he tells China when he goes, we love seeing how great you're doing. And what does he tell them about us? That we're lazy. What does he say about our kids? He said our kids are behind. But he loves that they're doing well. What kind of a leader is that? Shouldn't a leader be telling his people stuff sort of to them and representing them nicely whenever he goes outside the country? Brazil, he gives them money to help with their oil fields. And by the way, Soros invests in that same company. His buddy who's involved in this whole redistributive, bring the currencies down, jockeying for making a new world order.
Of reapportioned wealth.
In Kenya, against the law, in 2006, probably or 7, at the time he was getting ready to run, he did one of those grand drive-thrus like he's done in other countries. I don't know if he does it so ostentatiously now, but by the way, people have remarked how many vehicles and how many contingents and how many hotel rooms he takes up when he does these things compared to other people. But anyway, when he was lesser but still moving ahead, he went to Kenya and did one of those, and that was against the law at the time, and helping with Odinga's campaign, I believe it was at the time. And that's against the law for a United States person to be doing who holds a government office. Then in 2010, he gave money to Kenya to help with put through a constitution that allowed Sharia law, maybe only in parts of Kenya, I'm not sure all. Mozambique, Mombasa, sorry. Yeah, he gave money, our money for that, and also it was, the Constitution had abortion as a right, and it did pass. And now in 2011, he's giving some kind of assistance to Kenya. Again, our people are in there, I don't know doing what. And he's in the Congo and in Uganda and in southern Sudan. And I'm telling you, look at that map and you start to see, more than meets the eye. It's definitely more. And I go back to Susskind's book in his interview with the president, when the president tells him, I couldn't make a story of it, so I didn't. Or, it tells him that it's, there's a story's got to be given to the people. I already told you about Turkey, hugs Turkey. Gabon, he had this guy come to the White House, the head of Gabon. The most that you could pick, and there are more like him, most horrible owner of all the money of Gabon, where the people live as absolutely, on dirt. And he invited him to the White House, a Muslim person, whose country is in Africa, across the other side, the west coast of Africa. And Libya, he was very quick there, and guess what? Now the Muslim Brotherhood, which was disallowed to be public, has come public with a summit. He was very quick to help Libya. He didn't help Iran, because maybe Turkey is one in line, and with Saudi Arabia, to be the leader of this Muslim push, which is around the world, but really going hot and heavy in the countries of Africa. Egypt, he made quick contact with the people that overthrew the government there. China, share technology, as I say. And remember when he closed down programs in NASA, and he gave the guy, who was African American, by the way, just for the record, so that you know more about these things. The head of the NASA agency is African American, and he spoke about it, and he said that the president gave him instructions to sort of bring Muslim nations up on technology that he was familiar with and make them feel good about themselves. Russia's stepping all over us now. Russia's no friend. Russia's outrageous towards us. But, he made this thing. He's got closeness. Made that deal with Russia, that nuclear deal. Gave them sort of an advantage in it. But most of all, this is a killer. I can't believe people accept it as at face value. The ATF Fast and Furious program, where about 2,000 heavy-duty guns were allowed to go into the hands of narco and other criminals and not be traced.
Fast and Furious, under the Obama-holder Injustice Department, intentionally allowed over 2,000 high-powered automatic weapons to be purchased by criminals and taken to Mexico with no follow-up.
Doesn't anyone scratch his or her head and say, come on, there's got to be something more nefarious. Stuff like this can't possibly happen just out of ineptitude. How do that many most horrible weapons get put into the hands of these outlaws without anybody watching or attending to it?
Justice Department's ATF Bureau personnel clamored to get this known, and finally it came out.
Let us just bring out something else, too, for the progressives. We could call the president an assassin because he has that drone program that's killing innocent people constantly. And do we want a world where we're sending drones around and dropping, including on U.S. citizens that we deem to be terrorists or whatever? Boy, we're getting into some dangerous territory. And shouldn't we be screaming like Code Pink did when Iraq was going on? Why are you going around dropping bombs on people with many innocent people getting killed all around the world? And that's been being ramped up and ramped up. Why don't we notice these things? I just wanted to throw that in before I end here. There's so many things to throw in. But I guess I'll stop with just saying that, curiously enough, or usually enough, or naturally enough, the president was a lawyer and trainer and cohort to ACORN, a group that during his or after his campaign he said, oh, he really barely ever heard of them. Remember when I said about lying? Should I call it misrepresentation? Anyway, back in the day, when his campaign got going, he admitted to this, and that's how more information was found out about it. He led a group that took over a bank, and they called themselves Occupy, I forgot whatever. And no one knows if Obama himself was in that group, but he was a trainer of that group, a planner of what they did. And this probably was about giving people mortgages and so on, but, taking over and going in and busting their way in. And it was called an Occupy movement. That's what he did. He did organizing. Make people feel bad about themselves and get them to believe, they could change the system to what he did. And then his people, these people, Soros and Media Matters and the very Move On and all these people with other goals in mind. Bill Ayers is out there teaching these protesters now. Just a guy in his neighborhood too, Bill Ayers. That was his word on that. The president's word on that. But he was involved with these flotillas. I mean, he's connected with these people. They're connected with him. So, it's stealth. It's not the truth. It's a storyline. It's fantasy. It's not real. It's highly, highly costly. It's impoverishing us. And I wish we could not be zombies and we could just look clearly for what it is that we are going down for no good reason. No good reason. God bless the United States of America. Did it need work? Had it gone into excess? It certainly had. Did we need that money for people to get educated, to promise kids scholarships guaranteed? We had all that money. What we could not have done with it, where is it now? And we are going to be paying more taxes. It's inevitable. Making less money and having the value of our dollars be less and less and less. Oh, are we going down? What a shame for no good reason. Nobody came and bombed us yet. Nobody busted this place apart. Maybe Mr. Obama is extremely successful. Extremely. And the next time you look at what's in the news and what's coming around, start to think of, rather than a natural flow, how it is all flowing. How do all these things happen to be
coalescing and
promulgated in a smooth, stealth,
public,
unaware fashion? It's a Ripley's Believe It or Not. Ladies and gentlemen, I love liberty. I love free speech. And I kind of love people. I have, God forbid, I'm not more loving than the next person. Are you kidding me? But there's some kind of faith I have. I don't know. I don't mean religious faith, but there's something in me that gets me up every morning. And some kind of belief I have that we're on an evolutionary course. to do better. It's very, very slow. And right now, we're going sideways, down, and backwards. Boy, if any material is made for us to mold and work with and make it better, it's the United States of America as it pre-existed in 2008, the beginning of 2009. Ladies and gentlemen, goodbye for now. Thank you. Think hard. Life is hard. Thank you very much.